and Regeneration Committee. Do we have any apologies, substitutions, or declarations of interest?
Convener, no apologies were submitted.
Michael, I would like to declare an interest, please. And it's an agenda item, I think it's agenda item 8, as a member of the Inverclyde Community Development Trust.
Okay, thanks for that.
Michael's calling just the same as Ronnie, a member of the trust board.
Okay, Colin. Anyone else?
Michael.
Yeah, Chris.
Thank you. I'd like to declare an interest in agenda item number 3 by virtue of my membership of Inverclyde Leisure Board and Boglestone Community Association. That's various items. Agenda item number 5, member of the Board of Inverclyde Leisure. Agenda item number 9, Housing Update Board member of RCH. Agenda item number 12, Property Asset Management Public Report, Board member of RCH. Agenda item number 13, Property Assets Management Private Report. Having an interest in one of the items which I will disclose during private session. And agenda item number 14, Grieve Road Board member of RCH. And with respect to agenda item number 13, private report, I tend to leave the chamber when that item's been discussed.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Michael, myself for Inverclyde Leisure.
Okay, Jim, thank you. Is that everyone? Yeah. Okay, well, before we start, Gail has brought forward an additional item of business regarding the residual waste contract update. Now, the reason for the urgency is following communication received from our waste contractor in light of potential costs and service implications. A report is included for members as a matter of urgent consideration. The report will be considered in private due to the commercial sensitivities. Are we happy to take the additional item?
Paid.
Paid. Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, moving on to the agenda. Item number 2 is the Environment Regeneration 21-22 Revenue and Capital Budget, period 5 to 31st of August 2021. Matt, you take this?
Yes, thank you, Convener. This. This is the normal revenue and capital update for the committee. I wouldn't propose going through the detail of the report, but I'll take any questions later on if that's okay with you. The main point is really to look at section 2.2, which highlights the current position. We're currently showing a £255,000 overspend in the committee. And while that is quite high, also that's a significant improvement from last period. It's a £72,000 improvement. I would also flag that of that, some of these items are actually recurring pressures that are going forward through the budget process. So if it weren't for these recurring pressures, we'd be in a much lower position, maybe about just under the £40,000-50,000 mark, which would be an improvement. Officers continue to work on the figures here, and we would expect this figure to decrease further as we go through the year. And the main reasons for the overspend are highlighted at 2.3. I'm happy to take any questions on them. The other item is obviously the capital side. Capital is on budget at the moment. Spend does remain low for this time of year, but there are a number of significant projects that are now on site. We expect that spend to pick up as the year goes through. And we're currently projecting slippage within the committee of 808,000, sorry, which is 6.4%, which is within the limit. Slightly concerned on the slippage, but again, we've hoped that some projects will possibly improve with that as the year goes on. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, Matt, thanks for that. Any questions for Matt? No. Can we agree recommendations? Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, item number 3 is the Environment Regeneration Capital Programme progress and property related items. That is Gail and Eddie.
I'm happy to come in first if that's okay.
Okay, Gail, that's fine.
Yep. So nothing really to add to the report apart from to note that we're setting up a space for people members briefing that will go through a number of the monitoring that's currently underway. We hope that will be set up prior to Christmas. And in relation to flooding, there's currently a pause in the development and delivery of flooding projects as the Scottish Government are currently reviewing the flooding budget and all of the projects that previously been awarded funding. We will provide updates on that as we receive them. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks, Gail. Eddie, do you want to come in? We'll maybe get questions from both at the end.
Yeah, thanks, convener. And like Gail, I won't go through every project, but I'll just highlight any specific progress or any issues. On the Lyle Fountain restoration, the dome was reinstated this morning, and the crowns and shields and the final water and electrical connections will follow on over the next few weeks. The former Babylon building demolition is at tender evaluation stage. We've resubmitted for planning approval now that we have a more detailed method statement for the work, and that will also allow us to re-engage with the adjoining property owners to conclude the access agreements. So an acceptance will be possible upon conclusion of those two tasks. On the Green Up Municipal Buildings Clyde Square roofing project, the works are progressing towards completion, and we have a plan in place for the staged removal of the tent and scaffolding, working back towards Cowan's Corner. So we expect full completion by mid-December. Progress has also been made in projects such as Ivy House, which is now to tender, and the Boglestown Community Centre re-roofing project, which has been returned from tender within budget and with a formal acceptance imminent. In 7.5, we've put a wee bit more detail in there on the progress of surveys on seawalls and defences, including slipways, and we hope to progress further surveys prior to the end of the financial year, weather conditions permitting. The first phase of the Custom House Square cobbled roads is progressing well on site, and there's a second phase about to be tendered. I'm not sure if he wants to kind of cover some of the City Deal projects as well. I can cover the Ocean Terminal. The contractor's now completed the piling works and the foundations are well advanced for the preparation for the steelwork commencing. We've previously reported the delays due to the ground conditions on projects, and the contractor's focus will now be in trying to recover some of that time. It should be noted, however, that the construction sector supply chain issues in respect to materials and labour availability remains a risk on this and all capital projects that are being progressed at this time. And there's another additional item in section 9, convener, and hopefully it's pretty straightforward. It involves the re-tender of the Blacksmith term contract. Although the contract is limited, the combined value over the 2-year terms exceeds £500,000, and that's why we're seeking delegated authority for acceptance. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Okay, we've got one question in the chamber. Graham, we were delighted on first. So.
Oh, thanks very much. It's good that people in the chamber are being noticed. I've got a few questions. Would you like to take them all at once, or would you like? Yeah, it's okay. It's 5.3 spaces for people. This is most of my box, maybe apart from Bronx, but only that for a moment. And yet we've tried to words on our papers today. So I wonder if I can ask the monitoring of the traffic flow on the spaces for people, that we're all aware of the challenges and tension that's been going on. So I suppose, when will we know the monitoring has been concluded? When will officers put a paper before committee? So what will the date be that we'll receive a report on this monitoring of the traffic flow? And should committee choose to remove that cycle path, what date will that work start? So that's my question for 5.3. I'll move on to 5.13 for the cremator replacement. Constituents are obviously well aware, they've challenged me on the removal of the trees from the cemetery, but I suppose they're our trees and we can remove them if need be. But we're just concerned, there's a half answer coming from officers that the work has temporarily stopped. The trees have been removed for Scottish Power, I believe the contractor put in a new mains cable. Now, will more trees be taken down? Has it been stopped because we've got a problem with it? What's the reason for stopping? Will more trees be taken down? Will constituents put on any consultation at all? And if Scottish Power is putting in a new mains for the new cremators, will we have to dig up Carl Hill Street as I've just resurfaced them? Question 3 for 5.6. I'm just looking for more of a narrative on what this agreement and Esplanade is going to be extra nature restoring from nature restoring funds. And there's going to be a new rewilding and biodiversity projects on the Green Up and the Green Up Esplanade. For the report before us today, I don't really understand what that means. I just wonder if also can expand on it. And finally, at 7.5, the seawall Yeah, Seawell story. And I know that the current slipway in Guru Bay is talked about, it's 50 years it's been there, and yet we want to improve it. Constituents tell me it's done really well for all the years that's been there. It served the purpose, and questions have been asked why we're potentially going to spend money on something that's worked well for 50 years.
Okay, thanks, Liam. Stuart, do you want to come in on some of the answers?
In terms of Councillor Brooks' first question in respect of the cycle lane, in Miss McFarlane's introduction, she indicated that there is an intention that there will be an all-member briefing before Christmas, and that will address the concerns perhaps that Councillor Brooks has in respect of the movements that have been taking place with regards to the cycle lane. With regards to removing it, I think that's possibly a step too far at this stage, because certainly in terms of the feedback that I've been getting, there has been positive comments being received about the cycle lane, and a number of complaints that have been received by the cycle lane following the mitigation measures that we put in place with regards to bus shelters, right-hand turn lanes, etc. There's certainly been a significant reduction in the number of complaints, and indeed there are positive comments coming on it now. So I would hope that the members' briefing would be able to satisfy Councillor Brooks's concern in respect of the cycle lane, and if not, that's something that can bring back to a further committee.
Okay. Gail, would you like to come in and the next item?
I think this is probably Eddie in relation to the cremator work. I'm not aware of any trees that we've removed currently. So if Eddie has nothing to add, I can take that away as an action and provide an update.
Yeah, convener, I don't have any knowledge of any tree removal unless we'd have to go and check with officers and come back.
Okay. Dave, what was your second and third question, sorry?
5.16 about the rewilding of the Renewal Esplanade. I just don't understand the context. Whereas, and finally, on the seawall, if it's lasted 50 years and done well, why do we have to spend money?
Convener, I'm happy to take the rewilding question.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm happy to do an elected members briefing though that maybe just sets out a bit more information about this project. We've been awarded funding to look at locations where appropriate vegetation can be planted. This is part of the biodiversity and also greening of some of our sort of urban areas. So I'm happy to provide some more information on what that may look like and the sort of planting that could be involved, if that is acceptable.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And the question on the seawall.
Yeah, convener, I can take that one.
Yeah,
The reference to 50 years is actually the suggested design life post taking forward the works that the consultant recommends, not how long it's been in place. It has been in place for some time, and clearly when we get a specialist consultant to look at items like this, they will have a range of different interventions. So that is the optimum design solution to give it another 50 years life and to address some of the issues it currently has. It's not saying it can't be used at the moment, and indeed we are in the process of taking forward some work to completely clean down the slipway and improve the life safety in terms of the life ring location and type and some signage. So we're addressing the immediate recommendations, but obviously capital funding is limited, and when we conclude the exercise of looking at all sea defences and slipways, we will need to bring back a fuller report for consideration and whether we have to look at any capital investment in these. But this is a kind of an interim update, if you like, on the work that we've progressed so far, but there will be further work to be undertaken in the surveys and further recommendations.
okay, thank you. Dave, okay with that?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Jim Clockton.
Thanks, Michael. Michael, I've got a question on 6.5 and the recommendations. And obviously what we're saying at 6.5 is the allocation of 675,000. We're actually nominally putting that against Babylon, Jamaica Street and King George V and then only if there's money left over will we reallocate it. I suppose that my question's in two. I'm happy with the recommendation. I would hope that both Babylon and Jamaica Street would come in at budget or very close to it. Wee bit worried that George, the sixth building has always been a bit of a money pit. I wouldn't like to see everything getting poured into that. But what I would ask Stuart is that there's no mention of the town centre regeneration forums in this. Now I know this is a parent committee, and rightfully it will come back to this committee. But I would like to be assured that any extra would be at least discussed at town centre regeneration forums to get the ideas from there of any money that we've got left out of that 675,000, which I hope is going to be substantial. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, Jim, thank you. Stuart,
Yeah, through you, convener. In May of this year, £400,000 from the Down and Village Centre money has been allocated against the demolition of Babylon. As Mr Montgomery indicated earlier in his introduction, we now have a preferred contractor, and there are discussions with regards to the demolition of the properties taking place with planning, and an application has been made. With regards to KG6, there's been an allocation of £200,000 for carbon reduction measures. Now, if you add the two of those together, it comes to 600, so there's only £75,000 unallocated, Councillor Clougherty, between those two interventions. But what we have is the £600,000 for the place-based fund from the Scottish Government for next year. So what my proposal, convener, is that we allow Mr Montgomery to continue with the development of the Babylon demolition and the KG6 building. If there is any monies unallocated from that, then it comes back to a prioritised list, which involves projects across all of the town and village centres, whether that be the potential for canopy replacement at Princes Street, streetscape works at St James's Terrace, lighting in Gourock Park, slab cleaning across the area, a fallback position on West Blackhawk Street if the Sustrans monies or the Sustrans applications are successful, town and village centre signage, John Street fencing, and potential speed reduction measures. And these are all items which can be discussed at the town centre regeneration forums, with a view to then coming back to committee with recommendations as to how that money is spent. Clearly, the 675 is for this year, and with the allocations that we're looking at, I would suggest that the majority of that's allocated against Babylon and KG6. But as I said earlier, if there is any balance, then that's then discussed with the town centre regeneration forums, and it comes back to this committee for decisions.
Okay, thanks, Stuart.
Okay, Jim. Okay, Ronnie.
Thanks, Michael. It's 5.6, 5.7 and 5.16. On 5.6 on the car park at Shanty Road, the construction work, as far as we can see, has now been finalised. I know there were problems with getting material and so on. It dragged on for a few months, but I'm delighted to say that it looks as though most of the construction work, if not all of it, has now been completed. So for those involved, it was a good job. Timiously, but it was a good job, and we've got lots of plaudits and thanks from a whole range of organisations like the Bowling Club, Nursery, Parent Council, the school, residents, and so on. So just one question on that. I wonder when we hope to have the line markings carried out on that site, when that's going to take place. That's one thing. And on 5.7, I must say I'm kind of gobsmacked, because we're saying in 5.7 that we're now looking to get some survey and remediation work carried out, and that one really just blows me away. I mean, we've had the money in the budget here for 2 years for this site. What we've got at the moment is a hole in Upper Gourock, an absolute mess in Upper Gourock beside St Ninian's School. We asked the questions back as far back as April. We were told we would have some kind of plan. We asked in May, we asked basically every month, right up until now, going back for the last 7 or 8 months. And in no time did we were ever told there would be any potential remediation work, or we'd need to carry out some kind of surveys. I mean, basically, excuse me, all we've been asked for here is really for the area to be landscaped, to be tidied up, and basically maybe throw in some seats. And if we've got enough funding, can we put in potentially a cycle training area there that a lot of the residents have asked us about? I mean, it's not as if we're going to be building houses on it. So that one has come to be, to us to be an absolute bombshell, to think that nothing is really going to move and we're going to need to carry out some more work on that. That's just blown me away, or blown us away. And in 516, I don't, like Graham, I don't necessarily understand the whole aspect of that, but just one question from me on it. And it is that a lot of the comments that we get regarding the prom site at Guruk and so on is about Japanese knotweed. And I just wonder if there's any opportunity there, given that we have been awarded 88,000 from the Scottish Government, to maybe have a look or to make some kind of recommendations regarding Japanese knotweed, because it's becoming, I know we don't at the moment, but it is becoming a real serious problem, certainly in Lower Europe. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, Ron, thank you. Gail, do you want to take the line markings at the car park?
To take the questions. So in relation to the line markings, they're due next week. They were delayed due to weather. So hopefully that they'll be completed next week. In relation to the surveys, following a review of all the survey from previous in relation to the ground, a few things have flagged up as a concern. So we need to do further review of that before we would be able to advise whether remediation works were required. And that is ongoing currently. It's something that we don't necessarily have the full skills in the team, so we're looking at other sources for support with that. In relation to the Japanese knotweed, I'm not clear whether we are able to fund that through this funding, but I can look into the funding criteria and revert back if that's acceptable.
Thanks, Gail. Ron, you give that?
Yeah, thanks, Gail. Thanks, Michael. Gail, just one question. Why is it taking us to basically November to decide that we want to carry out some kind of remediation or survey work in the old St Ninian site? Why is it taking us 7 months?
As we've been reviewing the survey information, we have been asking further information, and as it's not something that the officers know a lot of detail about in terms of remediation, so we've been looking into it in more detail, and that has taken a period of time to get access to the site as well. So that is continuing, and in particular as well, officers have been dealing with our response to the pandemic, so we haven't been able to prioritise this piece of work, so it has taken us a bit longer to get to it.
Okay, my last point on that would be, didn't we do any remediation or survey work when we were building St Ninian School initially?
I can comment on that, convener. Yeah, there were investigations undertaken when the demolition was completed, as part of the kind of handover agreement in terms of completion. The contractor has to take samples of what he's left behind, so that was undertaken at that point. Not regarding the wider site itself. Obviously, the investigations for that project were undertaken on the part that the school was built on, rather than the part they were vacating. So I suppose there probably is an area of the existing site that probably didn't have a lot of information on, and I know there are mine workings in the area as well, as you will be aware. So that is all within the kind of information held, with our contaminated land officer and other officers. But as I say, limited information on the existing school site, more investigation done on where the new school was being built.
Okay, thanks, Eddie. Thanks, Gail.
Okay, thanks. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Before I ask my question, I just sort of asked Councillor Clougherty to note that I've noted his comments in regard to spending money in Greenock, but not that bothered about spending money in Port Glasgow there. Those comments are duly noted. Just the questions in relation to the introductory remarks that Gail made around flooding projects, and just to see if you could expand a wee bit. Obviously, we've had an ongoing programme of projects to address flooding issues across the district, taking a bit longer than we had obviously hoped, but we've been going forward on the basis of the assumption that the funding is in place for these projects. Are you saying that we're being advised that funding may not be available?
Thank you. Through you, convener. Thank you, councillor. The flooding budget has been oversubscribed, and there is a review being undertaken of that budget, and all local authorities have been written to, and we've been asked to pause the development and ongoing works at the appropriate point on all of our flooding projects whilst a review is undertaken. We will then be written to in due course to be advised whether the funding is still available for our project, and if the funding is still available, if it's still to the same extent. We're not clear yet when we'll get that information. We'd hoped that it would be autumn, but we have not as yet received a further update. We have provided a lot of evidence and information to that group that are reviewing the position.
Convener, I find that very, very concerning, because we've been taking forward these projects, and obviously we've completed quite a number of projects, but we've been taking over these other projects on the assumption that the funding had been awarded to us and that funding was in place, and that we were going to be able to complete these projects. So we're now being told that potentially some of these projects won't have funding. I find that very concerning, and I think we should be asking yourself, convener, to write to the relevant minister to raise our concerns around these, because certainly the outstanding projects we've got to me are very important that we get those completed. So I really think this is totally unacceptable. We've been told that we were promised funding and now being told that funding may not be available.
Okay, absolutely, Stephen, I agree with that. Okay, John Crowther.
Thank you, convener. There's three questions, one on flooding, one on 5.10, which is structures, and the other one is 7.5. That's the sea walls and retaining walls. The flooding one is basically quite simple. Now that the autumn leaves are falling, we've had periods of heavy rain. Fortunately, nothing like what they've had in the biblical amount of rainfall that they've had in the borders and in Cumbria. However, can I be assured that the gully cleaning in areas that are susceptible to flooding is currently ongoing? The next one is to do with the structures, and I'm happy that the principal inspections of these structures are ongoing. I also note that where there are structures under Network Rail, that has also been ongoing. However, there are other structures that are in private hands. I was just wondering the situation with them. The main example really there is the bridge at the Greenock Ocean Terminal that goes over Brom Street. And is there any way that we can check that that bridge indeed is safe, especially as it is used on a daily basis? The last question really is going down the sea walls. And I know that the council is mapping its assets, and that's very welcome. But when I check the asset register, I know that there's only 4 entries in that, 3 in Gourock and 1 in Port Glasgow. Now, it does quote that there is 3 slipways in Gourock, 1 in Greenock and 3 in Port Glasgow. But if I go through Gourock, at least, I notice there's a substantial amount more than that. There is at least 8, 1 to the west of the Royal Gourock Yacht Club, and there's also On the Gourock Esplanade, there is a few as well, i.e. at the bandstand at the West End. There's a Cragburn slip, Maybank slip. We can also move over to Albert Road where there's a slipway there. That's the one I think that's recorded in their asset register. There's also the new slip at the Pier Head, one at McLean's Yard in Cove Road, and the former Adams slip, which is probably private and would not be on that register. But as you can see, there is a substantial more. So would it be possible for these assets that come under the council to be added to the register so that we know exactly where they are? The other one is to do with the sea walls. And again, there is issues such as the East India Harbour and the sea wall that extends from the harbour entrance to Custom House Quay. And again, that is in land that was transferred by Inverclyde Council to Riverside Inverclyde, who in turn leased it out to Peel. It's just to find out the terms of the transfer and the lease and whether Inverclyde Council would be responsible for those sea walls, or would that come under either Riverside Inverclyde or Peel Land and Property?
Okay, John, thank you. Gail, do you want to tackle the body?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. In relation to flooding, our gully cleaning has been underway, but we also target hotspots. So when we receive weather forecasts potentially for heavy rain or sort of a yellow or a red weather warning, we will focus on key locations that we do get repeat flooding issues. In relation to structures that are in private ownership, it's the responsibility for the owner to inspect and ensure the asset is kept maintained and in a safe use. If there are key locations, we can write to those asset owners advising that we would like them to confirm that they have been maintaining and they have been inspecting. But we wouldn't tend to do that as of right because of the time resource that would take. But happy if there's particular locations that you are concerned about, that the team can look at who would we be best to contact to look for comfort on that.
Okay, Gail, if I just come in there, Gail. One, thank you for your response regarding the flooding. I was really just seeking those reassurances, and they have been given. Thank you for that. The bridge that leads over Bronx Street is the one that I have more concern about, in view of the number of people who walk in that area, the number of cyclists, but more importantly, the number of vehicles that travel that road on a daily basis. And it's just to seek assurances that checks have been made on that, because the last thing we wish in our hands is some disaster in that area. So currently that is the only one that is of any concern.
Phil?
Okay, Convener, can I come in on the slipways and the sea walls? Okay, so I mean, this is part of the challenge of this exercise, is identifying exactly which assets are ours and where the lines are drawn in terms of responsibilities and ownership in some of these walls, which is less than clear in some cases. So in our kind of asset register, we have 7 that's mentioned in the report: 2 in Albert Road, 1 in Cove Road, Port Glasgow, Anderson Street, Eldon Street, Greenwich and Barry Park, that is, Coronation Park, and then Newark Castle Park. But I do appreciate there are more slipways out there, but these are the ones that are currently registered as ours internally. But we will certainly look into any other ones that we feel may be in the grey area. In terms of the kind of Peel and RI side of things, we are aware that Peel have recently been undertaking their own surveys of seawalls, and we've made contact with Peel in that respect, because we obviously would like to continue that, to continue where they have stopped in the ownership in the areas that we are definitely responsible for. So that's the next area of activity for property, is to look at that area. But there will be a legal process to go through entitled checks and looking at various documents to establish exactly where the line stops and the responsibilities lie. And as I say, it's a challenging process and it's one that's not going to be done in a short space of time, but we are prioritising based on assets that we're confident are absolutely ours, and then we'll work towards the ones that need more investigation.
Okay, that's fine, that's lovely,
Thanks,
thank you.
Thanks, Eric. And they see, as far as John's mentioning the bridge at Bronx Street, I mean, there's no indication that there's any issues causing us concern regarding that bridge, are there?
It's not a thing I could comment on, convener, but I mean, we're all aware of the bridge, but I think that is that responsibility of Peel as well, or Clydeport, isn't it, from memory?
Yeah, okay, okay, thank you. Chris?
Thank you, convener. I suppose the issue with Brom Street highlights the sort of the piecemeal nature of the legacy railway infrastructure in the UK. It's very difficult sometimes to put a finger on who actually owns what. Going back to the actual comments on the paper presented, I've got a number, and I'll go through them. So basically, I think if I take 5.1 to 5.3 as one comments, because obviously I think they're all interlinked. I very much welcome the additional cycling projects through East India Harbour and Mirren Shore. Certainly Mirren Shore is obviously something that's required a bit of investment for a long period of time, and it's something that I know a number of members of the council have raised this as an issue. I also want to thank officers for what they call the pedestrian crossings at King Street, Church Street and Glasgow, which I think will have a great impact on what they call on pedestrian safety, going from the bus stop to what they call it, to the main shopping area. So very much thank you for taking Councillor MacLeod's suggestions on board in that respect. With respect to the spaces for people in SBT, I think I very much welcome the fact that we're going to have a members briefing on this issue. I'd also like to maybe suggest that we want to maybe extend it out to include the other projects that are also in plan, because I noticed that it'd be good to see what the East India Harbour and the Mirren Shore projects as well. So if it's possible to include those within that members briefing, that would be good. I note Graham's comments with respect to removal of the cycle path at Rome Street. I presume mostly is the one he's concerned about. I think I would agree with the comments that have been made by officers of the council. I think we've got to be very careful here and what statements we are making by removing this active travel infrastructure, especially if it's no longer providing any negative impacts on traffic flows. Because at the end of the day, we're looking at a situation where we've got COP26. We're all highlighted about the fact about environmental and how we actually reduce our carbon footprint. And like it or not, driving around 1.5 ton vehicles to move you less than 4 miles is not how you reduce your carbon footprint. You have to look at different ways of travelling around, and people might not like it, but the cycling is one of the best ways, most efficient ways to actually move around, even in an area like Greenock with the obvious hills. Now, so I welcome the fact that there's going to have a members briefing on that, but I also note the 5.2 above is talking about the works to link the traffic signals on the A770. Obviously, that will have an impact on possible traffic congestion along that route as well. So I hope we'd be in a position where we can look to see what the impact those linking the traffic signals would have on the traffic flows before we make a decision on any changes to the active travel infrastructure that we've just put in. I think if you get a comment back on that at the moment, then we can move on to my other comments, I think.
Okay. Who's taking that? Neil?
Take it. Thank you, convener. Thank you, councillor. No, thank you for your positive comments. I'll feed them back to the team. In relation to the cycling proposals, more than happy that we do a bit of an update where we're at and also our next steps as part of that briefing. And in relation to the linking of the traffic signals, a big part of that will be reviewing and monitoring the success of that, but also monitoring whether any tweaks are required so that they are correctly talking to each other. But we'll be happy to provide an update on that at the briefing as well, if you think that's appropriate.
Thank you. I think it's just about to make sure that we've actually done as much as we can to improve the traffic flow in the area. Though I wish we want to move to a situation where there's a lot less cars on the road. Obviously, you want to avoid the situation we've got internal combustion engines standing still, just spewing out what you call carbon and affecting the environment with it. So we've got a process of moving from one form of transportation to another form of transportation, and we've got to make sure we do that in a way that encourages people to make that change. Going on to section 5.5, flood risk management. I agree with the suggestion by Councillor McCabe. I think that's a good thing to do. It's important that we do that. I think it shows the fact that the fund has been oversubscribed. It probably shows an issue with respect to how our climate is actually changing, how we're getting greater flash floods, we're getting greater rainfall intensity. It's not the usual constant rain we get in the west of Scotland. We're now getting quite large cloud bursts. So this is something that's going to have an impact on us going forward, and it's probably an indicator of the early stages of climate change and the current climate emergency we're going through. With respect to the Nature Restoration Fund, again, I'd like to have some more detail about that. I think it's a great fund. Within my own ward, I think there's a number of areas as well that could be available or would be useful to look at with respect to rewilding and biodiversity projects. Certainly, there's a large amount of open space that could possibly be utilised in that way. Moving on, with respect to item 7.5, which has obviously been a major talking point in this meeting, I would certainly suggest that I note that the amount of money that's been proposed, and I know that might be for a 50-year design for one slip road is £380,000. I did a quick total up on the slip roads that actually recognised as council in this paper, council owned in this paper. It comes to £2.8 million if there's a similar level of investment required at those slip roads. So I think it's important that we possibly do a review, and I think probably members know of slip roads that are possibly not being mentioned within this paper. There's certainly 3 in Pro Glasgow, the 3 different ones, the ones I thought they were. So I certainly think we need to do a review of the assets moving through this process. And I think looking at it, we probably need to have a long-term strategy about where we actually want to provide these sorts of facilities within Inverclyde, because repairing all of them might not be the most cost-effective way of doing that. So I think it highlights the fact that we need to have a strategy with respect to the slipways, which I think are a great asset to the local community and are well used. With respect to the coastal sea defence structures, I think I'm coming at this from a slightly different point of view. I do have concerns about the new Arctic Kelburn Park embankment and the gaping baskets there. I don't think that should be something that we actually own, and I've raised this issue a number of times. So I welcome the fact that there's going to be further work undertaken to identify the ownership here. I think it's critical that we don't assume that we own that, because the evidence I've seen from I'm not as good at looking at these things as Councillor Crowther, but I've had a little look at the ScotList website, and certainly the title deeds around that area seem to refer to the trunk road. So although it's Strathclyde Regional Council seems to be purchasing land, it definitely seems to be as an agent for the trunk road development. So I certainly would like to make sure that we investigate this thoroughly, and certainly make the case that the appropriate party for maintaining those gaping baskets and that earthwork is actually the Transport Scotland. So it'd be good to get confirmation of that from officers. And it's a couple of things that are not on the agenda, which I'd like to maybe get an idea about whether we're considering. I noted that in the budget yesterday that of the £4.8 billion levelling up fund, which is obviously the taxpayers' money that the UK government has identified for that fund, of that £3.3 billion has been allocated in stage 1. Obviously, we're waiting for stage 2, but obviously we all know that the Inverclyde Council did not have a project in that, or didn't have a project successful. So I was wondering if officers can advise on that. What sort of projects are we considering, and when will we be, as elected members, be able to have input into those kind of projects?
Okay. Sure, that's it.
Through your convening. I can assure Councillor Curley that we will fully investigate the ownership in respect of the gaming baskets between York and Kilburn. Recognising the potential liability associated with that, it will be exhausted to ensure that the ownership is concluded. With regards to the Levelling Up Fund, Council is currently considering two projects in respect of the Levelling Up Fund. One, a culture quarter around the area between the Glebe and Patrick Street. And the second one is in respect of the A78 and the Oak Mall. We're waiting to, consultants are working on both of those projects just now. We will bring them to a future meeting of the council with a weathered eye on the submission dates for the projects. Both of the projects have been tested in terms of eligibility, so that they're both capable of being submitted in respect of the Levelling Up Fund. One of the questions which remains unresolved is whether the stage 2 projects will allow for a transport project and a town centre project. At the moment, we are working on the basis that there are two projects that we can potentially get for Inverclyde, but if there is only one project, then we'd have to prioritise one of those projects over the other.
Okay, thanks, Stuart.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Before moving on, I'd just like to mention the cycling, walking and safer streets, and I think it would be remiss if I didn't mention my colleague, Councillor Moran, and indeed the Port Glasgow Community Council for highlighting issues at Murren Shore. And with regards to the flooding issues, happy to write a letter, but I think it would be helpful if the SNP members of the council would also make representations to the Scottish Government regarding the funding as well. Okay? Yeah, okay, Sonny.
Thanks, Convener. Just one small point for myself. It's item 711, Custom House Square bollards. It relates to this says there are second phase to address unauthorised vehicle access to the pedestrian riverfront walkway. Now, there's a piece of land behind the beacon to the east of the beacon. At the moment, it's undeveloped, and it's a very popular piece of land for fishermen. Can fish from their car, as it were, use the boat and all the rest of it, and it's very good for disabled fishermen. And I know a lot of people use it, and a lot of people come out with the area to use that. And I don't think that's an area we should be shutting off at this time while it remains undeveloped. I think it's an area that we could utilise and make more attractive for the fishing who come to the area. It does bring a lot of people to the area, and it's a very pleasant place to be over summer evening. And I don't think we should make sure that that place is not shut off from the public access at this time.
Bill?
It's one for probably me to comment on. I mean, all I would say is I've witnessed vehicles driving along there, which is effectively what is a pedestrian and cyclist route, and the speed of the vehicles is a hazard. So I think, respectfully, I would disagree. I think that needs to be addressed. How you might access the area you're mentioning, I don't know if there's access from another area, but I certainly wouldn't support vehicles traversing that area, which is supposed to be for pedestrians and cyclists.
I would agree with what Ed was saying from the Beacon side, but there is access from the Victoria Harbour side, which can come in. Vehicles can enter from. The best of times, although there are bowlers there, sometimes do not permit access to the area. But you sometimes see there was film crews down there recently. The fairground's been down there recently. There's been caravans, so there is access, but sometimes the access is closed from that side, and I think it should remain open.
Okay, Ruth, thanks for comments. Chris McElhenney, Chris.
Thanks, Convener. I was going to raise this question under item 6. There's an update on the Gourock to Dunoon ferry, but I thought it was probably actually now more suitable on this report because we're talking about capital matters. But obviously it's related. It doesn't really make sense that there's a commitment to build 2 new Gourock to Dunoon ferries, but there's also a commitment to build a bridge between Gourock and Dunoon, and considering the impact that would have on obviously myself and Councillor Alfell's ward, really drastically rearranging the fabric of life, I guess, in Gourock, albeit there would be obvious economic benefits certainly to the Dunoon area. But I'm just curious, has there been any dialogue and an update from the Scottish Government with the Council as to a timeline? You know, what is the site that they intend that the bridge would actually tie up with Gourock? You know, the commitment was made, I think, some 6 months ago, even though I think Transport Scotland did rule that out as an option initially in terms of fixing the issue with the rest and be thankful, but then the government obviously overruled that and says that that was their preferred option. You know, but it's, you know, would be a huge project in Gourock in terms of how it would impact people's way of life, in terms of the, you know, the existing issues, Albert Road, Clock Road, etc. I wouldn't imagine it would be feasible that it would come in anywhere near the Battery Park. So I'm guessing, even though the water's, you know, a ridiculous level of depth to be building a bridge at Clock Point, I guess that's the only point there. So I don't know if Mr Jimmison's had any dialogue with the Scottish Government, or it's just been a commitment that's yet to be followed through on.
Sure. Convener, personally, I've had no contact by Scottish Government or Transport Scotland, and looking at Ms McFarlane, she's shaking her head, so she's not had any contact either, Councillor McElhinney.
Okay.
Michael?
Yeah, thanks for that. Would it be possible to just, you know, get an update on that, because it is quite a, you know, a huge project to have committed to, but not really providing any update to people that live in the area. You know,
yeah, okay.
By the way, there could be a bridge at some point that leaves the road next to your house.
Okay, we can do that, Chris. John Crowther.
Thank you, Convener. If I could just come in with the comments by Councillor Mackenzie, and I can speak as a sea angler, and I am well aware that area is used. I have had a long discussion with the council officers on behalf of constituents who have made frequent requests that the temporary barriers be removed. I could not go along with those requests simply because they are driving on a footway, and as such they're actually in breach of the law. And I welcome the report that states that the barriers will be in place. Should access be required from other areas, would that not be left up to the leaseholder, i.e. Peel Land and Property?
Sure. Through you, Convener, Councillor Crowther's absolutely right that Peel Land and Property have the lease on the area around East India Harbour, which is under consideration by others at this moment in time. So I'll raise these points with Peel Land and Property.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm aware that we're item 3 of a 16-item agenda here. Chris, do you want to come in?
I did warn you, Convener. With respect to the suggestion about the SNP members writing to the what do you call it, the Scottish Government, yeah. Well, happy to take that on board with the group. But I would also suggest that maybe if we did a joint letter to show that the unified commitment that we have is for all parties within Inverclyde, that'll be forward as well. And I'm happy to do a joint letter with yourself as convener and myself as the largest in non-administration representative. With respect to the comments made by Councillor Chris McElhinney, I certainly welcome it. I think it would be good to get clarity on this issue, because I think my understanding of it is slightly different from Councillor McElhinney's. Personally, I'm not really in favour of a bridge between Gourock and Dunoon, because I think there's going to be a large environmental issues with respect to doing something like that, and of course they would have a knock-on impact on the economy of Gourock, as highlighted by Councillor McElhinney. But I think it's important to get it clarified, because my reading of the manifesto, which I think was what he's talking about, was that there's a review of general provision around island and remote communities that would benefit from bridge construction, and one of those was highlighted in that as a possibility was Gourock to Dunoon, but it didn't have it as a commitment. So I think it's good, and that is a slightly separate review from the one that was done with respect to the Rest to Be Thankful, where it was ruled out as an alternative for the A83, but obviously it will be captured within this wider review about island and remote communities. So it's worthwhile to get, I think I would agree that it's worthwhile to get it clarified. Thank you.
Okay, Ronnie.
think Chris Cully's just stolen my thunder there. I think it's Chris McElhenney will know that the consultation on the A83, the rest and be thankful. I think the bridge was one of the solutions that was put forward, and from memory it came last as not being viable in the consultation. That's not to say I don't know where it's at, but that certainly is, as far as the general public were concerned, it was a no-no. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can we move on to item number 4? Can we agree recommendations?
Chris McElhenney.
Oh, we'll watch this.
So he didn't say that he was leaving, so I don't know if you want to pause if we can.
Okay, you want to pause, try and get back in, yeah.
Right, he's got his campaign story for today. Stop the bridge.
It's a bridge too far.
Exactly, Ronnie. That's the headline in the telly.
I might have spoiled it for him. It's a terrible shame being a bridge designer, not being a favour bridges, you know.
The bridge was Ennis Nelson's idea anyway.
I was just thinking that.
No, it wasn't. No, it was a tunnel. It was a tunnel. I don't think Ennis had the bridge.
No, it was a
No,
bridge.
not a tunnel. No, definitely not a tunnel.
I was at the committee meeting.
I think it was Mike Russell that came away with a tunnel.
Oh, was it? Okay. That was a good idea, I say.
The having a bridge across there would make a huge difference, and it would bring a lot of investment into this area as well as across the water. And I mean, it's been mentioned there about, you know, carbon generation. That having traffic travel right round creates a lot of carbon, you know, if the ferries aren't running. So you could save a lot of carbon burning by having a bridge there.
What's the carbon when you build it though?
I was
out in China and they're doing that anyways. From Australia.
Okay, we can't go this much. We'll have to just move on, okay? Okay, item number 4 is the Economic Regeneration Strategy 2021 until 2025. Stuart.
Through you, Convener, at its meeting in June of this year, the committee approved the Inverclyde Economic Regeneration Strategy 2021-25 and the action plan for 2021-22 to 22-23. Whilst it's probably a little early to be reporting, we undertook to report on a regular basis, and there are a number of actions which are duplicated in the Workforce Development Update, which is covered elsewhere on the agenda. Appendix 1 provides members with the update. There are several positive items of work, including our new people board of apprentices, and some items which are less positive, including the recruitment of our business development officers. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Okay, questions for Stuart? No? Can we agree recommendations? Great, thank you. Okay, item number 5 is the greenhouse gas emission reporting and achieving net zero. Stuart, you take this over?
Yep, thanks, Convener. The report before you sets out the greenhouse gas emissions reporting requirements under the Climate Change Scotland Act 2009 and also seeks approval for a net zero strategy for the Council. In 2015, the Scottish Government brought into force the Public Bodies Duties section of the Climate Change Scotland Act to introduce a mandatory reporting regime. In the reporting period for 2020 and 2021, the Council has continued to make good progress down to 10,564 tonnes, which reflects a 45% reduction in our baseline figures, which commenced in 2012-13. On a like-for-like basis, Convener, on the same indicators as those used initially, it's actually a higher intervention at 51%. Earlier this year, the Council, following the announcement of the climate emergency, the committee allocated up to £100,000 to establish how we could achieve carbon zero by 2045. Mabit, as consultants, have worked with officers to achieve practical strategy, which is contained in Appendix 2. This marketplace convener is changing rapidly. However, using the technology which is available to us today, we believe that we can reduce our carbon emissions to 5,246 tonnes, which represents a reduction of 72.5% by 2030-31. The focus on activities is on buildings, waste, transport, street lighting and water. The indicative cost of achieving this reduction is £10.5 million, about 4.6 of which is identified as business as usual and the remaining 5.9 as new spend. Convener, if members support the approach which is identified in the strategy, i.e. a two-stage approach, which is a 72.5% reduction by 2030-31 and carbon zero by 2045, then a detailed action plan will be developed with financial implications which will then be presented to members. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart. I don't see any questions in the chat. Sorry, Chris.
You're trying to be too quick there, convener. I've got one or two questions, and I do apologise. I don't want to go into too much detail on these, but please bear with me. First of all, I do welcome the strategy. I do welcome the principle of reduction and then dealing with any residual energy consumption by the council. I think that is the correct way to go ahead with this. I welcome the introduction that Mr. Jameson made about respect to the climate emergency, but I do note that terminology is not used within the strategy as the forward. I think it would like, for instance, if we could use that terminology. I'm always conscious of the fact that when we talk about climate change, that term originally came from loosely deniers to the issue of global warming, and it was a way of what you call of making it sound a little bit woolly and a bit nice. So it's just about climate change, nothing to worry about. So obviously the climate change is creating a climate emergency, and I think it's appropriate that we acknowledge that, possibly within the foreword of the report. I think we've got to make sure that it's not just climate change, it is a climate emergency. It's not changing for the better, let's put it that way. With respect to the net zero target in 2045, I note the suggestions that have been made with respect to what you call it for getting low carbon sources of heat, etc. But I do note there doesn't mention anything about hydropower as a possibility within Inverclyde. Certainly as an area that developed because of the abundant supply of water to power a large amount of our industry in Inverclyde before the advent of steam power. It would seem that we should be able to utilise some of that natural resource to mitigate any ongoing energy demands. So again, I think it would be good if that could be put into the strategy. Specifically from target 2, page 9 of 23. I think that's very useful. I also welcome the inclusion of the people in restoration. Obviously, this has to be done in consultation with the existing tenants, etc., within our farms. But I think it's important that we again restore what we can to actually create effective carbon sinks within our area. And on the issue about trying to generate electricity and generate energy locally, I think it's quite an important point. I note that a lot of our targets, a lot of our actual energy use at the moment, and I take it a lot of these are actually very much standard, but our actual emissions include grid electricity transmission distribution losses, which account to just under maybe about 8% of our total. So if we can actually generate electricity locally, we can effectively remove 8% of our carbon emissions, just purely the fact that we're not relying on grid supply. So I think it's a good way of trying to do that. Whether or not the standards and whether or not the general way we actually do that can enable us to do that, but I think if we can source our power locally, it would give us the opportunity to reduce that energy use. And again, moving on, I just wonder if officers should confirm, because obviously we're using our baseline as 2012, 2013, and obviously most of these targets are based around 1990, which was the original Rio summit for carbon reduction. I wonder if officers are able to give any sort of guidance about how our energy use in 2012, 2013 compared with our possible energy use in 1990. Is it likely that since 1990 to 2012, 2013, there was a general process of decarbonisation anyway, and so we're actually probably producing a slightly higher net reduction as well. So that'd be quite useful if somebody could comment on that. Oh, just go sitting. Also, I note that a lot of our energy use in buildings is related to our education establishment, and I'm conscious of the fact that as a council as a whole, we have provided a lot of new buildings, and we're just wondering whether or not we'll be able to get funding with respect to improvements to our estate, school estate, with respect to improving reducing the carbon footprint. Obviously, because we've spent a lot of money and we've got very high-class educational establishments. But I'm just wondering, would there be funding available through any education capital funding for school improvements that could be captured within this to try and reduce our education, the actual energy in our education buildings? And I note that a lot of our transportation carbon footprint is related to the grey fleet. And again, I welcome the fact that as an organisation that we've transferred across to a lot of electric vehicles. Again, that's one mix, but of course there's other ways of doing it as well. But I'm just wondering, will the action plan come up with a way of actually trying to address the grey fleet and how we actually encourage our staff and provide the staff the ability to actually move from carbon intensive transportation use to low carbon use? I noticed that is within the strategy that we want to do that, and I welcome that, but I'm just wondering, will the action plan give us a defined way of actually achieving that? I know the UK government, for instance, provides salary sacrifice, etc., for if you want to actually have an electric car as opposed to a high emission vehicle. So is that something that we could consider, for instance, bringing in for our employees as well?
Thank you, James. What do we through there?
I think that's basically most of it.
That's true, okay.
Let's see what
our local electricity production, energy use 2012-13, schools, capital funding and electric vehicles.
Thank you.
In any order you like.
Convener, our strategy is very much based on carbon reduction. We recognise the differential between carbon reduction, carbon mitigation and carbon offsetting. And clearly we want to reduce the carbon footprint as opposed to just planting some forests. So the focus is very much on our buildings, waste, transport, street lighting and water. What Councillor Curley is talking about in terms of hydro, wind, you could also argue river, is mitigation and potentially reduction. But what we believe is with having a two-stage approach with the focus on reduction as opposed to mitigation is the right way to do it. Clearly, hydro, wind, sea all require significant capital investment. What we're looking at is a scheme which will significantly reduce our carbon production and working within the parameters of what we've got. So looking at replacement boilers with appropriate heat sources, and you'll see from the report that we indicate that to achieve a 72.5% reduction, it will require an investment of about £10.5 million, of which 4.6 of that is against almost business as usual, but also recognising that every year Mr Montgomery's central repairs allocation is under pressure. So it'd be wrong to say that it's just a 5.9 spend to achieve a further 20% reduction. what we're keen to do is to progress our way through this in achievable outcomes, almost bite-sized chunks. What is the technology going to be in 2 years' time? Is there going to be hydrogen in the gas pipes? We don't know. Is it going to be in the gas pipes in 7 years' time? So what we want to try and do is make sure that what we're presenting to members is realistic, it's achievable, and that it also can potentially be funded, recognising the challenges that the council faces in terms of its budget over the next few years. To come up with an extra £5.9 million to the original very, very challenging budget situation that we face is a challenge in itself. But if you were to go and build a hydro scheme, or you were to go and build a wind scheme, clearly the costs associated with that capital investment are significant. So what we believe is that it's a meaningful, realisable strategy that does focus on what we can change, and then look at mitigation thereafter. The people in restoration, we know that we're getting a report. Well, unfortunately, because of an injury, we're going to be getting a report in April of next year from Nature Scott. But the scenario is that clearly within Inverclyde we do have resources which can mitigate as long as they're managed appropriately. So it's looking at all of these things in the round and coming up with a balanced view as to how we can achieve carbon zero by 2045. What the focus of this paper is, are members, without going into detail, prepared to accept that a 72.5% reduction by 2031 and then carbon zero by 2045 by whatever means within the intervening period. Sorry, in terms of the further questions that Councillor Curley asked, the reason that we're using the 2013 data is because that's the one time we've got robust data. Yes, you could possibly argue that going back to 2009, we could have achieved a further reduction, but it's proving it. So that's why we're using the 2012-13 data as the baseline information, recognising that we could have potentially gone back 3 years, but it's about being able to prove it as part of our annual returns that there has been a baseline of information and then being able to take it forward. With regards to the education aspects, the part of the strategy document does actually consider education, but it's not education, just education. If you know what I mean, it's not just the school estates, it's educating us all. So can we turn out the lights? And part of that is something that we're prepared to look at. With regards to the grey fleet, yes, we are considering an expansion of the EV fleet, and that's something which will be developed as we go through. But I'm afraid that we're into the kind of level of detail that the action plan is going to get into. And clearly, if there is finance available for it, we'll do it. But if there isn't finance available for it, then we need to work within the parameters that we've got. I've got to say, I expected to get to this level that it would cost an awful lot more. So what we have looked at, the buildings in detail, and the action plan we propose be coming back to the January committee. So this isn't a long gestation for us to come up with the action plan. It's establish the ground rules and then take it forward from there.
Thank you for that detailed response. I think, as I say, I do agree with the strategy. It's reduction first, and then we look at the mitigation. What I would say about the hydro generation is I think I'm conscious of the fact that there's a gestation period to actually get these things off and running, and I know technology is all changing. And if tomorrow somebody does invent cold fusion, then we're all singing, what do you call it, all dancing. It's going to be great, but unfortunately we work with technologies we know at the time we've got it. So I would like to see us try to see about in the action plan and trying to acknowledge the fact that we do have this ability. It might be small scale micro generation, but we can do a lot of them. We've got a lot of hills in Inverclyde, we've got a lot of water in Inverclyde. And my understanding is that quite a lot of these times, these schemes do pay for themselves. So it's finding a mechanism that we can actually do that. And it is the mitigation that towards the end, but I'm just conscious of the fact that if you look at this in 5 to 10 years' time, we might have an issue. But if you start having a double stream here. We want to reduce, yes, but we've also got to do the fact is that at the end of the day, we're still going to have lights on in these buildings. We're still going to have some sort of electricity, and how we deal with that. And another thing which I forgot about, which I've just remembered, is I note that the report also does not include our Inverclyde Leisure properties, which we own and are managed by Inverclyde Leisure, and also doesn't include properties that we rent. And I was just wondering, I would like to, I certainly would like to have a situation where these are actually included within the strategy, and whether or not Stuart can actually identify what would be the implications of getting those included within the strategy. Because it seems to me that these are large buildings that that at the moment their energy use are not within this report, and it is, though we do have Inverclyde Leisure, which is a standalone organisation effectively managing these, they are providing a service which we as an organisation deem as necessary. So we should really be, I think, should really be bringing these within our review as well.
Okay.
Through you, convener. I suppose that what I'm keen to do is that we get on with the Inverclyde Council portfolio just now, to go back and build in the Inverclyde Leisure portfolio by January is going to be a tough ask.
Okay.
What I would ask is for the committee's indulgence that there is a recognition within the report that Inverclyde Leisure's estate is within the council, but you'll appreciate that we don't control the emissions within the Inverclyde Leisure estate. It's Inverclyde Leisure who control those emissions because it's they who operate the hours that they want to operate. And there's no restriction on that by the council. So in the same way that we want to turn the lights off in schools, we wouldn't be able to impose an Inverclyde Leisure that they turn the lights off at 9 o'clock and put people out. So there's a bit of work to be done with Inverclyde Leisure. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to come back to committee with an action plan for the Inverclyde Council's core portfolio. And then as we develop the action plans, because recognising this is going to be delivered in 24 years' time. So there's opportunities for us to introduce further in the short term of detailed work with Inverclyde Leisure.
Okay.
Thank you. I think I welcome that commitment. I think it's important we do, because at the end of the day, okay, we don't have control in when to switch the lights on, switch the lights off, but we do have control, and we do provide for the major maintenance within the facilities, which include boilers, etc., and these sort of things. So I think we just need to look to see about how we actually, as effectively as we want to be a gold standard for reduction in carbon. So we can't. I don't want us to say, well, these are these bits. We don't need to look at these bits because they're managed by somebody else. I want us to look at the whole of the service that we as a council provide and where we provide that service, because I think it's important that we do look at that. But I don't want to get in the way of delaying the main body of the report, but I think it's important that we do catch these things as soon as possible.
Okay. Sure.
Just in terms of Councillor Curley's request in the forward that we make reference to climate emergency, just to get committee's approval for that to be included.
Okay, can we agree that? Yeah. Stephen, you're next.
Are you sure Chris is finished?
I am now, Stephen.
I was just going to say, in terms of the climate emergency, convener, we didn't actually formally declare a climate emergency in Inverclyde. A lot of councils did declare it. We never ever passed a formal motion declaring a climate emergency, but the Scottish Government passed one, and we are part of Scotland, so I suppose we've got a climate emergency in Inverclyde. I mean, I think it's a good piece of work. I don't know how much of the £100,000 we set aside it cost us, but I think it's a good piece of work. And it's obviously very pertinent that we are approving this strategy, hopefully today, just before COP26, when the whole issue of net zero and climate change and emergencies is very much in the news. And while the strategy is coming to this committee, I mean, it clearly is a major issue for the council as a whole and for all elected members. And I think it would be helpful if we maybe did have an all-members briefing on this that allowed us to maybe look in a wee bit more detail and discuss in a bit more detail the sort of ideas and the plans that are there. So I would hope we can arrange that. I was going to ask about the timescale for the action plan, but Stuart's already answered that in response to Chris in terms of talking about January. And I would hope that as part of any sort of action plan and costed action plan that we are going to be looking at potential opportunities for attracting external funding, because I mean I've seen examples of projects that have been taken by other councils, and clearly they have attracted the external funding. I mean, we've obviously attracted funding for likes of charging points and whatever, but in terms of sort of replacing fleets, we've seen recent examples. A couple of the big councils, albeit they were getting criticised for their electric vehicles sitting in car parks, but they were getting significant funding. We've seen an example recently of Western Bartonshire Council sort of having a district heating scheme that utilises water from the Clyde as well. So there's a lot of sort of innovative projects out there among other authorities that I'm sure we can sort of tap into, and obviously look at the attracting of external funding. So it's just to maybe seek assurance from Stuart that we are obviously going to be out there looking to see what funding is available to try and support us with the implementation of this strategy.
Convener, with regards to the all-member briefing, is Councillor McCabe looking for that briefing ahead of the action plan, or just as we're presenting the action plan?
Well, either would do, to be perfectly honest, Stuart. Whatever you think's most appropriate would be most informative for elected members. I'm certainly relaxing. Obviously, I'm happy for us to approve the strategy today, but in terms of the briefing, whenever you think's the most appropriate time to have the briefing.
Okay, and with regards to external funding, absolutely, because we need to maximise external funding, because if you just look at the report in terms of the £5.9 million that's required for us to achieve a 72.5% reduction, then with the budget pressures that we face, then we have to maximise all available external funding.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can we agree recommendations? Great. Okay, item number 6, a general update report. Sure.
Convener, as part of the COVID response, we have the opportunity to provide a general update for noting. Section 4 provides a number of updates, which include the Gourock to Noon ferry update, governance of external organisations, green ports and emergency powers. You'd be delighted to hear I've not got a long introduction. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks very much. I wonder if Stuart can give us a little bit more rather than a long introduction on 4.17. Where are we?
I think it's safe to say we're in a state of flux. The dialogue between there's no common ground between the Scottish Government and the UK Government in respect of grey ports or green ports. The latest meeting which I attended was that because of that lack of agreement, it could be that we end up with 4 ports in Scotland, whereby you could potentially have 2 green ports and 2 free ports. However, that has not been confirmed by anyone other than officers at UK and Scottish Government level. It's safe to say that there's continued dialogue. The Metropolitan City Region has expressed a desire to participate in the bidding process associated with it. We are led to believe that a prospectus for the green ports, which are led by the Scottish Government, is likely to be issued shortly. The Metropolitan City Region has had regular meetings in respect of green ports, free ports, because we only thought we were dealing with green ports, but now we're potentially dealing with both. And we're in a pretty strong position from a Metropolitan City Region perspective in respect of these ports. Forgive me for simplifying it to ports, because we effectively have 3 modes of transport within our Metropolitan City Region and potentially 4 ports. So the ports that would be under consideration would be the Greenock Ocean Terminal in KG5 in Glasgow from a sea perspective, Glasgow Airport from an air perspective and Bells Hill from a rail perspective.
Thanks very much, Kevin. It's helpful to know that obviously on top of it, I understand there's a challenge from obviously the two governments, Scotland's two governments, debating, if not arguing amongst themselves. But I think it's crucial that if something happens in Scotland, be it green, be it free, or be it any other colour, that we are at the table to maximise the economic opportunities that these free ports would bring.
Thanks, Glenn. Ronnie?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, it's just a very quick one. I hope on the Gourock Dunoon ferry, and I'm hoping maybe that my Gourock colleague Chris McLean might have some additional information to what I have here. I think the first thing I would be asking is about the Gourock public consultation, which is in 4.6. I have to say, and it could be down to me, but I have to say that I don't know too many members of the Gourock public who filled in any consultation about this particular subject, which really surprises me a wee bit. But again, that could be down to me. I have to say that I read recently that on this route there have been 2,000 failures by the Argyll Flyer. For those who don't know the route, there's two for the better, I think they're called boat tub or bathtub boats or something, but there's 2,000 failures by the Argyll Flyer. There's been 15,000 cancelled sailings on the Gourock Dunoon route since 2011, and nationally 6,000 ferry sailings have been cancelled in the last 6 months. It's a complete and utter disaster in terms of ferries in Gourock to Dunoon and in particular Scotland. And when I read the report here, Stuart, about the concept of a vehicle between Gourock and Dunoon and add Kilcreggan into it, yet again I have to say I think this is yet another red herring. I mean, I think I began being involved in this materially in about 2007, and I'm sure Jim Clotterty will remember that we were travelling over to the Queen's Hall to have a discussion with the Transport Minister, who at the time was Nicola Sturgeon herself. We were having a transport meeting in the Queen's Hall, and she couldn't get across from Gourock to Dunoon from Calmac. She had to get transported down to Western Ferries to get across. It didn't even sail that day. But basically, we've had so many red herrings about this. We used to meet in the chamber in Greenock or upstairs in the boardroom, Queen's Hall, other locations in Dunoon, discussing this. And basically, it really is political will that's stopping this happening. I mean, at the end of the day, there's been so many red herrings. European procurement rules basically were one of the reasons they said we can't really address this at this point in time. Professor Neil Kay, who's the acknowledged expert on this, basically said that was nonsense. That was completely discredited. Then went on to talk about the length of vehicles and the tonnage, and no one has addressed the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the berthing fees at Gourock. So no independent operator will pay £1 million annually to berth at Gourock. It just does not make sense. Now, that basically is a CMAL decision. So there basically is there's so much in this and have been for so long that I have absolutely no confidence that any discussions or any consultations will make that happen. And in the meantime, we've got the ludicrous situation on the Clyde that Helensburgh is now off the map from the river. I mean, who in their right mind would believe that after 200 years you cannot sail from Gourock to Helensburgh? I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. We had great cooperation between two communities for hundreds of years, and now it's not even on the mat, it's not even on the table. We're talking about Kilcreggan, but not Helensburgh. It's ludicrous, and I have no confidence whatsoever that anything will come out of this. Message ends, Michael.
Chris, would you want to comment, Chris McLean? No, because I'm not here. Stuart, you want to just take it?
Convener.
Hi, convener. My
that's okay.
signal seems to be going. I don't know if you can hear me. I can briefly comment.
Yeah, we can hear you now, Chris. That's good.
Yeah, so I mean, the position for day one, the first project meeting I went to was that, you know, it's a blank canvas, and, you know, the communities, elected members, interested parties, you know, you can design the vessel, but, you know, it was pretty clear from the get-go that a car passenger ferry was not on the table. So, you know, it was a fait accompli, and it would be a passenger-only service. The boats will be built, but, you know, the best optimum model being the catamarans has been ruled out. And, you know, you're going to get a passenger vessel which will be more reliable than I think they're actually floating fridges, they call them, Ronnie. The two current vessels, they will be more reliable in them, but they still
when they float, Chris, which is not that often.
Yeah. So the vessel will be into Europe, but I can speak to CMAL because I got a presentation, but as members know, I've expressed concern over the working group I'm on. Operates under terms of collective responsibility, and, you know, you're restricted from sharing information, which, you know, I've never quite represented the council in a body, you know, that is so secretive that you know, people in the community say, can you tell us what's going on, but you're forbidden because you had to sign up to a confidentiality clause to actually attend the meetings. But as I say, as Councillor Alfield highlights, it's part of a bigger problem. You know, CMAL's charging CalMac for berthing. You know, it's robbing from Peter to pay Paul, and that is obviously part of the problem. Whereas on the other side of the water, obviously the council over there gets a benefit because Argyll and Bute Council get to obviously collect those fees and invest them in services. Whereas, you know, the way that the world worked out, we don't get any benefit in Gourock from the berthing fees. And I think one of the other points that we should be following up as a council is that there's a significant investment that's going to go into the pier, which, you know, the percentage of passengers that travel from Gourock to Dunoon is tiny compared to Dunoon to Gourock, but there's going to be substantial investment in the pier, which may well rearrange the pier in its current format. And I think we should, you know, even though it's not our property, we should have a say in that, because there could be a knock-on implication to Tarbert Street in the road, which I'm not quite sure what the current situation is in terms of traffic lights going there, but if it does then obviously reduce parking, which then obviously puts parking further back on towards Cardwell Road, as Councillor Alfield knows, you know, that would obviously cause, you know, just an unacceptable bottle jam, which highlights the point that, you know, the local people haven't really been involved well enough in the wider consultation.
Thanks, Chris. Sure you want to come in there?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Whilst Councillor Alfield raises a number of extremely valid points in respect of the operation of this group, is very much its focus is on the vessels and the infrastructure in terms of the berthing of those vessels. So whilst I recognise his concerns about this, unfortunately the update is just simply an update from the officer group, and it's perhaps there should be further representations made beyond that officer group in respect of his concerns.
Okay, Stephen?
Yeah, you can ask about the Inverkip City Deal project. Recently myself and some of my colleagues were down in Gourock knocking doors and speaking to local residents about issues, and the one issue that kept coming up was the challenges of getting out of the village at the Main Street junction. So in terms of the proposal to sort of decouple that junction from the main sort of project, and potentially us doing the works, where are we and what sort of timescales have we got potentially for this work starting and being completed?
Okay, sure.
Through you, convener, we have continued to chase Scottish Power Iberdrola over the years on this project, Councillor McCabe, as you well know. The scenario is that we now have a willing partner. They are pushing for a determination in terms of their planning permission in principle. They're hoping that it will either be determined in December or in January at the planning board. The consultation continues with Transport Scotland in respect of road safety audits. Ms McFarlane and I have a meeting with Scottish Power Iberdrola with regards to the procurement of the design consultants for both the Main Street junction and the Bruaker junctions, and we anticipate that the works will be completed in 2022-23 financial year, with a residual liability in 2022-23-24.
I'm grateful for that update, convener, but I mean, it is extremely frustrating how long this project's taken. It really is. And I just would urge officers to get across to our partners the frustrations that are being felt by elected members and by the local community. It just really, it beggars belief how long it's taken to get us to this stage, and we're still talking about at least potentially 18 months or so away to get this work completed. So it really, really is frustrating.
Convener, I can assure Councillor McCabe that that frustration is regularly pointed out to Scottish Power Iberdrola, and not only is it the councillors, the council, the community, the officers' frustration as well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay, and there, Chris?
Thank you, convener. On item 4.16 Inverkip, yes. Basically, I think going by what was just been said here, I think there's been a little bit of slippage in the programme from what we were last been informed. I think we were hoping it's going to maybe start just after Christmas possibly, so there's a wee bit of slippage there. So I note that, and I also note the ongoing time to get it done. Obviously, there's two main elements to the works, as seen in A78. There's the traffic lights at the junction with the marina and into Inverkip village, but there's also the roundabout that's going to be part of the Bruaker solution. Now, I wonder if officers can advise about that roundabout, because I think I'm concerned that, and it's important that these works get done, but I'm concerned that the works are done in the appropriate time, such we don't have a situation where we've got a roundabout with no access road off it for a long period of time. And just wondering if officers can provide some clarity on that kind of programming and when this kind of works will actually be done, because we want to have a situation where we're not having unnecessary works, and there's maybe a year or 2 years where others will await the internal roads within the development catching up with what's been provided in the A78.
Stuart, right there.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Members will recall that this is a 650 house housing development subject to getting planning permission. The gestation period for that, those 650 houses, is estimated to be between 10 and 12 years. The requirement for the link road is only after the first 150 houses. Sorry, the requirement for the link road is only after the first 150 houses are occupied, is the indication that we've had from Scottish Power and Transport Scotland. So the signalised roundabout at Bruaker will be installed on the A78, and it will be there as a junction, which will not be developed initially as a result of the requirement for the link road that then goes from the new Bruaker junction, Councillor Curley, all the way back to the bottom of the existing roundabout at Bruaker. So I can't give that guarantee that this link road will be in place at the beginning of the contract, because that is within the hands of the development arrangement between Scottish Power and any subsequent developers who take the site forward.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's just the situation. So will we be constructing the roundabout at this point as part of the separation of the different responsibilities? And I'm just wondering, as I say, I'm just getting concerns that we build something and it causes an additional delay to the roads, and it causes additional issues on the A78 without necessarily having the benefit of it actually connecting into the road within the scheme. And if it's possible that there could be, if you're talking about constructing this 22 to 23, and there's a slippage in the programme within the actual Inverkip development, we could be talking another 2 or 3 years beyond that, where we actually have the numbers of houses within the development that actually requires them to construct the internal road.
Sure, you can hear. When we say we, it's within the City Deal contract, but it will be Scottish Power who will be responsible for the breaker junctions. The council will be responsible for the signalised junction at Main Street, Inverkip, in terms of its construction, but it's Scottish Power who are responsible for the roundabout. Clearly, this is something which is being requested by Transport Scotland on their network. It will provide capacity for the Scottish Power redevelopment at the Inverkip Power Station site, but it's a fundamental requirement by Transport Scotland that the roundabout goes in, but the lights on the roundabout will not be installed in the first phase. It will only be when the link road becomes live that becomes a signalised roundabout. So yes, there will be impact on the A78, but that's something that can't be avoided in order for the planning permission to be granted in respect to the power station site.
So Transport Scotland is requesting that both these two elements of the works are done at exactly the same time, even though that there won't be a requirement for the roundabout until after the development gets to 150 houses. And as Transport Scotland saying, you've got to do these two things before any spade gets any ground gets removed and any what you call grass gets turned over within the Inverkip site. Is that correct?
As I said, the requirements for the planning permission in principle would be that, or for the planning permission to be developed forward, both road infrastructure elements need to be delivered. The connection to the bottom of Spey Road only is required at 150 houses. So you require the roundabout and the signalised junction at Main Street to start with the project. But the roundabout link is only required when there's 150 houses built.
And that's within the planning permission of the development. So there's no way to come up with a different way of doing that.
That's the requirements of Transport Scotland.
And that's those requirements are within the planning. Yeah.
Okay, I don't see another member in the chat. Can we agree with recommendations?
Agreed.
Great. Okay, item 7 is waste strategy review. Gail?
Thank you, Convener. The Council's waste strategy was developed in 2003, and this report advises on the forthcoming national legislation and policy changes in waste and recycling, which will shape the review of our existing strategy. The key elements contained within the report are detail on the biodegradable municipal waste ban, which comes into force in December 2025. This means that no more than 5% of biodegradable waste will go to landfill. It's commonly known as the landfill tax ban. In addition, we have the deposit return scheme. It was due to start in July 22. It's currently under review, and as we get further information on that, we will provide that. It means that there will be a refundable levy on 20p placed on drinks containers. So this will remove an element of that recycling material from our collection, and we will model that potential change as we look at our service delivery. The household waste charter is under review. It looks at how we collect our recycling and how we increase our recycling collection, and we continue to engage in that process. The Recycling Improvement Fund was launched last year. 70 million is to be allocated by 2025. Officers are actively engaged with Zero Waste Scotland and have submitted a number of expressions of interest. We're now working closely with them to see which ones can be worked up to become bids. They would be submitted towards the end of this year, early next. These are all to demonstrate an additional recycling collection and benefit, and it is for capital only. There's more detail in the report on that. So in light of changes, an option appraisal has been undertaken to review how we process and collect recycling, and the detail of that is contained within 7.2 and 7.3. That looks at whether there was an opportunity to bring that in-house versus the current arrangements that we have in place. It looks at both currently before the deposit return schemes in place, but also post the introduction of the deposit return schemes. So in short, the report sets out a number of the significant changes that will be introduced in relation to how we collect, process and dispose of our waste in the near future. This will ultimately change the type and nature of the waste we collect, but we will bring forward further reports when those operational changes are planned to ensure services remain fit for purpose. And I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks, Gail. Stephen?
Yeah, can I ask the question? It's under the Household Charter, Recycling Scotland Code of Practice. I don't know if I think I signed the council up to this code of practice, but it's the sort of last paragraph, that section where it talks about the non-recyclable waste, presumably the grey stroke black bin, and our current arrangements of the size of the bin and a 2-week uplift doesn't sort of meet the code of practice. So what are you talking about? Sort of moving to, if we keep the existing bin sizes, we need to move to a sort of less frequent collection, or we reduce the size of the bins. What's the sort of implications here, and what's the sort of timescales for that?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Convener. We don't have the detail of this. This is a draft sort of review that they're carrying out at the moment. And if we can demonstrate that our levels of recycling are such that we don't need to do certain service changes, that might be the case. So we'll continue to engage closely while this the development is underway and the update, and be able to provide updates on that to members.
Just to follow up, I mean, if we get any anecdotal or indeed sort of factual information on, in terms of, suppose, whether the grey bins and the fortnightly collection that we're getting, grey bins that are returned which are full to the gunwale, or whether they're half full or whatever, if we get any sort of information in terms of whether we're actually seeing less waste going into the grey bins, and there is capacity potentially to change the sort of recycling approach on that.
Through you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. At this current time, and for the previous sort of 15 to 18 months, we've actually experienced an increased level of residual waste due to the stay-at-home messages. So it's a difficult time to be able to look at that and collect that data. We need to wait till we are more back to life as normal. Though we are seeing a reduction in residual waste now, and we're not back to where we were pre-pandemic time. So it wouldn't be the appropriate time to be able to tell whether that is the case or not.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Convener. I take my hat off to Kenny for writing this report. I had to read it a few times to try and understand it. But on social media, I think Kenny was called Mr. Rubbish. But everything there is to know, Mr. Kenny Lang knows it. I just wonder about glass recycling. We obviously, as a budget cut a number of years ago, stopped the curbside lifting of glass. But there are a few councils where glass is put into a bin, and there's so many councils are different. I won't try and say which one it is. But during the review, is there any way that we can consider lifting glass, maybe not individually, maybe in the blue or the, I don't know. Anyway, is there any way we can rethink about lifting glass from constituents?
No.
Thank you, Councillor. As we move forward, the guidance is that actually materials should be separated more rather than being brought together. And it's difficult to know currently how the deposit return scheme will actually impact on the amount of glass that may be put into either residual bins or into our glass collection facilities, because of the fact that people will have that opportunity to return it, and there will be that levy on glass bottles. So currently, we need to see how that deposit return scheme affects our collections, and whether our forecast and the modelling that's been undertaken is as we expect, which is that actually the amount of glass coming into our mainstream recycling and residual collection will be vastly reduced.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Okay, don't see any more.
Michael, sorry.
Sorry, first, okay.
Yeah, I'd say I welcome the report. I think it's obviously been a little bit. It's going to be a process of us actually adjusting to the new deposit scheme. I I take it from what at the moment within Scotland there's really no non-single-use glass, which is obviously a terrible situation to be in. So we'd have to see what actually happens with that and going forward if we get a return to the returnable bottles. But I'm wondering how we're going to actually manage this, because we obviously historically we get the carry out, but obviously going forward we're going to get the carry in now. So it'll be interesting to see how many people actually adopt this process. But I think there is a great opportunity. It should hopefully encourage more recycling, and we just need to see how it pans out with respect to going forward and what impact it has on our services. So I suppose it's just a case of a watch and see report. Also, it maybe explains to me, but I think it's going to be difficult going down to every three weeks with respect to the residual waste. I don't know how we're going to manage that, because at the moment you can generally work out every second week, so I think it's one bin or the other bin. But if you go to 3 weeks, how does that tie with the recycling? How do we actually do this? It's going to be quite difficult to manage. So again, if there's any way of avoiding having to either change the size of our bins and move to every three weeks, it would be good. But it's an interesting report, and hopefully we can see how it develops.
Okay. Can we agree the recommendation? Oh, sorry, Innes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, every 3 weeks is obviously a problem, especially in the summer. You know, it's bad enough every 2 weeks. Bins are absolutely stinking, but to have bins 3 weeks old and flies do get in there and you do get maggots forming and all the rest of it. I think 3 weeks is just going a step too far for certainly for grey bins.
Okay, thanks, Lawrence. Can we agree the paper, the recommendations? Great. Okay, thank you. Okay, item 8 is the workforce development update. Jennifer, are you still waiting there? It's nice to welcome you to the committee. Jennifer, as you know, is our Regeneration Manager. Jennifer.
Thank you, Convener. This paper is to provide an update on all workforce development matters. As you'll all be aware, COVID has a massive impact on the UK economy and our workforce, and we're experiencing a marketplace that's changing quickly. So Inverclyde Council delivers employability services on behalf of Inverclyde Alliance, and this is done through a range of employability programmes. These programmes are delivered through 5 contracts, and I want to highlight, I'm sorry to say that I missed one of our contractors in paragraph 2.4. So the contractors are Inverclyde Advice and Employment Rights, Stepwell, Inverclyde Community Development Trust and Enable Scotland. These contracts have been in place since April 2020, and an extension was exercised last year to cover 21-22. The performance of the contracts over 2021 and up to August 21 have been shown in the appendices. As everybody knows, 2021 was a challenging year. Some contractors performed well over the period, but others have experienced particular challenges reaching targets. It's noted, though, that performance has improved through 2021, and we've seen improved results, and the team continue to manage this. In addition, the workforce development team who manage those contracts also provide services of modern apprenticeships, graduate work experience programme, wage subsidy programme, as well as administering Scottish and UK government funds such as Young Persons Guarantee and Kickstart. And in preparation for 2022-23, the workforce development team are scoping services and preparing retender of the contracts. We're also working with our local partners to refresh the local employability partnership. And I'm happy to take any questions on the paper.
Okay, Jennifer, thanks very much for that. Any questions from Jennifer? No? Okay, can we agree the recommendations?
Michael.
Oh, sorry, Ronnie.
Sorry, I was a wee bit late getting in there.
Okay, Ronnie, sorry, missed you. Okay, Ronnie.
It's Chris Curley, it's done it to you, Michael. Hello, Jennifer. Just a couple of points that I'd like to make. Some of the stats are well, middling, to say the least, but just to give the committee a wee upgrade. As of last Friday, I've got some updated stats with regard to the trust. And I'm pleased to say that client registrations are now up to 67% from 60. The training qualifications have gone up to 61%, and the clients moving on to further education has increased as well. I guess as you've said earlier, Jennifer, COVID seems to have played a major part in the effectiveness of a lot of what our partners do here. I just have 2 questions really. The first one would be, are Enable still in the game here? Are Enable still one of our contractors? And just a wee bit off subject, can you give us an update on the Community Renewal Fund? Because it's doing my head in. Thanks.
Okay, Stuart, do you want to be part of that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, convener. Councillor Alfield, as the report states, there has been improvement, and in the same way that you've identified that the trust have improved their figures, bearing in mind that there's a reporting period here, everybody that's in the report has reported at the same date, and so therefore, whilst it's helpful that there's further improvement within the trust, we'd expect to see that those figures continue to improve in the January report that we brought to committee. I'll let Jennifer answer the question in Enable, and perhaps if she's not able to give you an update in the Community Renewal Fund, I certainly had some anecdotal information that I received last night.
Okay, Jennifer.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor, for your question. Yeah, Enable are still part of our contracted services at the moment, so they are providing that contract. And in future, the tender will be open to all providers that wish to tender for the contracts. In terms of Community Renewal Fund, unfortunately, I don't have a formal update as yet. We had been told that the budget would, from then we would get an announcement, but unfortunately, I don't have anything formal, so I'll pass over to Stuart to give us his anecdotal information.
Thanks, Convener. Councillor Alfield, we're advised that every local authority in Scotland has got some allocation. We don't know what the allocation is, and the time scales for that to be spent will be the summer of next year. But as I say, it's only hearsay at this moment in time, but we'll provide further details once we get them.
Thanks, Stuart. Is that the first time that we've had any kind of informal or formal feedback on the Community Renewal Fund?
Through you, Convener, no. We've had lots of feedback that we don't know. We chase on a weekly basis looking for updates as to when decisions will be made, but that's the first formal or semi-formal announcement about there have been decisions made. Don't know what they are, but the delivery timescale will be the summer of 2022.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously they'll put that out then from the end of March to the summer. So I guess that's something. So I'm sure that you guys will keep right on top of it and let us know as soon as we have anything firm to report. Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Okay, we agree recommendations.
Convener, if you'd have been monitoring your chat, you'd have seen I was in before Councillor.
Well, you know they were actually exact same time, but okay, I'm
I don't know if I'm looking at my screen and I'm ahead of Ronnie in the chat. So.
Okay, Stephen.
Just to ask, I mean, it's a helpful report, but just to ask, what sort of, I suppose, intelligence do we have on the state of the local labour market and sort of demand and supply? Because obviously, anecdotally, we're hearing of shortages of labour in various areas, and I note the scheme that we've got going to train drivers for the sort of heavy goods vehicles, which is a very positive development. But what sort of intelligence are we picking up about the challenges in finding the employees locally, and what sort of opportunities does that potentially present in terms of us obviously trying to support people to get into employment?
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, you go, Jennifer.
So today I was at the Slades meeting, and although it's a Scotland-wide picture, it was definitely suggesting that job vacancies are at the highest level that they've ever been in Scotland. So there is a high number of vacancies out there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the need for employability programmes is diminishing, because there was a recognition there that there's challenges in terms of skills and work. Challenges that require interventions. I'll need to take it back in terms of looking at the picture locally. I can go back to the team and just get a wee bit more information there, and I can report back after this.
I mean, I think that would be useful. I mean, I'm not suggesting that it does mean there's less need for employability schemes, but the reality is it might mean that there's more opportunities potentially if we can get people who are maybe one step or two steps or whatever removed from the labour market, if we can get them the right sort of experience and qualifications and whatever, then it might be easier to get them actually into to work. So it's potentially that there's shortages of labour obviously present particular issues, but they potentially present opportunities for people who maybe are struggling to get employment normally anyway.
Okay,
Can I
sorry, gentlemen.
Oh, I was just going to come back in and say that that's something that the local employability partnership will be looking quite closely at as well, and working that into the delivery plan for future years.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Stuart?
Just to pick up on what Jennifer's just said, Councillor McCabe, clearly our employability pipeline looks at people who are furthest from the labour market and also those who are actively engaged in the labour market. And what we're trying to do is provide a suite of interventions which allows people to either upskill or get to a job, depending on how far they are from the labour market. So it's safe to say that the demands that are being placed on the employability schemes have not gone away.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Okay, can we agree on recommendations? Yep. Okay, item number 9 is the housing update report. Martin?
Thank you, convener. I'll endeavour to be brief, although there's a fair bit in this report. Section 5 of the report is an update on our process for development of the new local housing strategy over the next year. And an essential part of that will be the procurement of a house condition survey. Recommendation 3.2 covers this, and the decision to have the survey and the funding source are as recommended by the corporate management team. Section 6 is an update on the acquisition strategy we've developed in partnership with local RSLs, which is supported by the Scottish Government's resource planning assumption for Inverclyde. The main aims of the scheme are to enable RSLs to purchase property where this will enable stock improvements. For example, where owner-occupiers' inability to contribute to schemes is having an effect on the RSL's ability to take schemes forward. Scheme can also contribute to the purchase of properties where there's an identified specialist housing need. In the case of the latter, committee approval sought in recommendation 3.3 for the interim service director in consultation with the chief financial officer to top up available funding from the Affordable Housing Fund, where this will help to address a significant specialist housing need, particularly where this may contribute to long-term revenue savings for either the council or the HSCP. Section 7, brief update to the committee on progress on the specialist housing review to date, including the wheelchair accessible housing target and updates on the next steps in the review process. Section 8 is an update on the issue of empty homes and the empty homes officer post. Members will appreciate this issue is intimately tied up in the long-term empty review, which is to be brought back to P&R, I think, in early 2022. So it's proposed that as part of this process, a workshop will be held for members, which will assist officers in taking this forward. Section 9 is an update on the Council's returns to the Scottish Housing Regulator, the annual return and charter, and the assurance statement. Recommendation 3.4 asks committee to approve the assurance statement prior to submission to the regulator. Section 10 is an update to committee on area-based schemes, formerly known as HEAPS. There's quite a bit of detail in there. I won't go into it in any great detail at this point. And Section 11 is a very brief update on the strategic housing priority areas. We are currently seeking some additional input from the consultants on the Eastern Gateway study, primarily around high-level cost estimates for individual proposals. A report will be brought to committee as soon as we can clarify if these are practical. The Central Greenock study has been out to tender, and unfortunately the process elicited no tender responses. So we're going to look again at the project brief to ascertain the reasons for this, and following this review we'll re-tender and follow up with the Central Port Glasgow study once this has been done. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Stephen?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Sort of first one cuts across the local housing strategy and the sort of studies that we're undertaking. I was down at Woodhall this morning, and I mean I saw the potential of Woodhall, and it's been a frustration for a long number of years now that obviously we've not been able to get Woodhall developed. But the housing market appears to be booming at the moment. So I'm a wee bit frustrated in the length of time this sort of Eastern Gateway study is taken. And it would be useful to know when we can expect to see something sort of definitive come out of that. And to ask specifically in relation to Woodhall, whether we are seeking to work with our RSL partner to actively market that site. Obviously, as part of the Woodhall regeneration strategy previously, we were looking to try to actively market that site for private ownership. The other point is in relation, I suppose it cuts across both the acquisition programme and the empty homes programme. And I've said this to officers privately. I've been out and about over the last 6 months in my ward, and I've seen it before when I've been out and around before at elections. The number of empty properties that are lying about in the housing estates, and they are predominantly in private ownership. And I just think it's a crying shame to see so many properties lying empty when they could be brought back into good use as family homes, and they're in good estates, sustainable estates. And it's just, I just think we need to bring a focus to bear in that particular issue. So I'm disappointed to see that the post of the empty homes officer is vacant, and I can understand why River Clyde Homes might not necessarily think it's a direct priority to them if it's effectively dealing with empty private homes. But I just think there is a big issue there, and potentially an opportunity through the acquisition programme to try and bring many of these houses, which in some cases have been lying empty for 5, 10, 15 years, to be perfectly honest. So I just think there's a real focus that needs to be brought in it. We're doing a good job building lots of new houses, absolutely, but there's lots of empty houses lying about the district which could be brought back into use, and I just think we need to bring a better focus on that.
Okay, can I maybe take those in turn through you, convener? Firstly, Eastern Gateway. I would hope that we can bring the Eastern Gateway study one way or another, depending on either with the additional information we'd like or without, to the January committee, because we wouldn't want it to go any longer. With respect to Woodhall, obviously it covers that area, it covers various other areas. So until we've done that, we haven't been in direct negotiation with the RSL. On the subject of empty homes and the acquisition strategy, I think one of the intentions of having the acquisition strategy was to try and address the fact that what Inverclyde probably really needs is not necessarily more homes, but what we need is better homes. And whether those are better homes through the demolition of homes that aren't good and provision of new homes to replace them, or whether that's by the improvement of the stock that RSLs already have, we need to kind of find a way to take that forward. We have run into a wee bit of a difficulty around the circumstances in which Scottish Government are willing to allow the resource planning assumption money to be used and their contribution to be used. And at the moment, their policy is such that they can only use it where a home is actually on the open market. So that's very handy in some circumstances. If a home comes up on the open market, it will enable RSLs to buy it if it meets their needs in terms of improving an area, improving a block, or if it's a specialist housing need, but it doesn't really address the issue of homes that might really benefit from an approach being made to an owner. So Scottish Government officials have told us that they are in constant discussion on this and hope to maybe come back to us at some point in the near future with if there is a change to policy, but they're slightly hamstrung by that policy at the moment. So, but we will be looking at all the ways that we can use this going forward and learning from how it works in the first year. I should probably have said at the outset that obviously the acquisition funding also has to be remitted to PNR as the parent committee for the spend. But hopefully that will help.
Just to come back on that briefly, Convener, I mean, I think that's where, to me, there is a key role for an empty homes officer or officers in terms of identifying the properties, finding out who owns them, try to work with the owners to get them onto the market, to be perfectly honest, because that seems to be part of the problem. Is there's maybe the owner, the tenant, or whatever the property has died, and it's no legally passed on to anybody else, and the house is lying there for years and years and years. Some of these are then fault with the Crown as well, but we really need to be identifying these properties and actively seeking to bring them back into use. And I think that does need a specialist or specialists to really focus on that.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Graham.
Thanks for asking. It's actually continuing maybe where Stephen left off there on the acquisition strategy. I had some thoughts previously on actually trying to work out how that actually works. And also, there's good clarity there in the answer about as when it comes onto the market. But my question was originally based around, I suppose it still is, who then owns the asset? Is it the RSL that has used lots of taxpayers' money, whether it's came through the council or came directly from the Scottish Government? And there's any clawback in the title deeds of the RSL, who then owns a property, can obviously mortgage against that property. But yet a lot of that money has come from the public purse, either Inverclyde Council or Scottish Government. I just wonder if officers can help understand, who do these properties then belong to if we're using the taxpayers' money in the acquisition strategy?
Martin.
So the properties would belong to the RSL, but that doesn't really differ from the circumstances where public money is given to the RSL for new builds through the resource planning assumption. There's significant subsidy for new builds up to, I think, round about 75,000 per property at the moment from the resource planning assumption to RSLs, but they belong to the RSL and they are for letting. There are obviously limitations on disposal, but they would be assets of the RSL. Now, in the main, the funding for that would come partly 50% from the RSL and 50% from the resource planning assumption, which is obviously Scottish Government money. We are suggesting that in some circumstances that we would put additional money in where there was a significant housing need identified that we could assist with if a property was likely to exceed the limits of the scope of the funding as it stands.
So Keith, I just wonder then, if we are putting in, the 250% come in, it's not enough. The house is on the open market. We are putting extra money in, as I may phrase. Do we then affect the housing market? Do we push up the price of houses for the average young person who's trying to get on the property market?
I think given the amount that's actually in the Affordable Housing Fund, I don't think we'll have much impact on the housing market. There's a relatively small amount of money in there. It's 160k. So realistically, we might be talking contributions to, it'd be single figures of properties probably that we would be involved with.
Thanks for that.
Okay, Graham. Colin.
Thanks, Convener. The housing strategy seems to, go on supply and demand and what's actually needed across Inverclyde. But one of the things that I noticed needed to be mentioned in the report disappoints me is there's no mention of overcrowding. There's certainly a lack of larger housing accommodation available to residents in Inverclyde, and I'm sure other councillors must get that in books as well. So, as a strategy, I find it really strange that this is an area we haven't covered, because we do have a real lack of larger housing in Inverclyde. Now, I've spoken to the bosses of all house social landlords, and they have all admitted that they are not building enough larger properties. There's also a policy put in place by the housing associations where, there's an initiative where they're trying to incentivise for like people in larger houses to vacate them and move into one-bedroom flats. This has been so far this year, for that's been initiated, it's been an absolute failure. So should our strategy not address the failure of the housing association's policies to try and address this lack of larger accommodation? That's my question, Michael.
So through you, convener, the new local housing strategy, which will be a 5-year strategy, will obviously take into account the new housing needs demand assessment, which will identify any needs, including needs for larger houses if they exist. And we'll also be taking on board, we'll be consulting widely, including with members. So obviously the previous strategy dates back, well, now nearly 5 years it dates back, but we're aware of that these issues have been raised by a number of members and they will be taken into account in the formulation of the new strategy.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Chris?
Thank you. I think, obviously, I know there is issues with respect to, and it's important that we do actually provide the right number of houses which we require in Inverclyde. There is an issue with effectively what they call people who, for obvious reasons, like to remain in the family house they've lived in for a number of years, but that house maybe not necessarily meeting all the requirements at this precise moment in time. So there is a way of we want to try and see about how we actually move these things around, and it is something that, as a board member of Riverclyde Homes, we are aware and we are trying to look at. I wouldn't possibly consider the policy as a failure, because it's just been implemented and it is being constantly under review. With respect to the just general issues here, I just want to get on to the actual specialist housing provision, the review update. Obviously, as members of this committee know, that as a group we wanted to increase the provision to 10% of wheelchair accessible housing, because we're aware of the fact is that a lot of the housing with stock within Inverclyde is actually not suitable for wheelchair accessible or for other people with other disabilities. So we believe there should be a greater what they call provision within both the RSL and the general what they call private housing stock for new builds. I note that the proposed, and talks about the proposed plan. I wonder if officers would be able to advise when the proposed plan would actually be implemented. I'm conscious of the fact that it was out for consultation, and personally I know I made a representation about the increasing it to 10% of all housing types and styles as well, because it's not just important to have one-bedroom wheelchair accessible housing, it's important to have wheelchair accessible housing on a number of size of units, so that the wide variety of families who have people who require this level of housing can get it. So I'd be interested to see if you provide some clarity about when the proposed plan will be actually fully implemented. With respect to the 7.5, I really do welcome this widening of the housing need to address these issues. It is something that I'm acutely aware of, with representations from constituents with respect to how we address people who need supported accommodation and the availability of supported accommodation throughout Inverclyde. At the moment, for instance, there's very limited accommodation within Pro Glasgow, and certainly I would suggest that it's going forward, and as this strategy develops, that we look at identifying sites throughout Inverclyde. I can certainly provide officers with a number of sites within my own ward that would be suitable for this kind of what you call accommodation. So I do welcome the fact that we're looking at this kind of thing, because certainly there's a large. We all know of situations where we have all elderly parents looking after children who are now full adults who still need that supported accommodation, and that's been provided by the parents at the moment. But going forward, that will not necessarily be the case. So I think that's an important aspect we do need to look at, and I'm glad to see that that has been addressed here.
Okay, that's Chris. Any other member? No. We agree with the recommendations. Great. Oh, sorry. Okay. You want to take something?
Yeah, through you, convener. The local development plan, we did have the consultation. We have prepared Schedule 4s, but we are considering whether it's appropriate to progress with the local development plan in its current form, given the challenge that was received at the Court of Session in respect of Scottish planning policy and the specific guidance that was issued by that. We have a number of appeals which are going on. There is the appeal at West Quarry Drive. We've also been made aware of the appeal at Plain Druillettes, and all of these appeals are based on housing numbers. We are of the opinion that given that the West Quarry Drive decision was called in by the Reporters Unit on Scottish Ministers, that we should pause, and officers are considering the position given that NPF 4 is due to be issued. So we will be presenting a report to committee in January on that.
Okay, moving on. Item number 10 is information relating to pontoons and Inverclyde, a request by Graham Brooks.
You're on.
Okay, thanks. The only thing I'll add to the paper that if the committee does agree, the officers prepare this report, that the report is in public, and if required, a private appendix is made.
Sure. Can we agree? Graham's request? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Item number 11 is the consultation regarding proposed lease of advertising hoarding site at 95 Dalrymple Street, Greenock. Stuart?
Convener, the advertising hoarding in Dalrymple Street forms part of the common good of the former Borough of Greenock. In terms of the Community Empowerment Act 2015, public consultation is required prior to the council reading a decision on the proposed lease, and this report seeks the committee's authority for such a consultation. Happy to take any questions.
Alice?
Yeah, I'm quite surprised that this is coming forward, and I say that because it's not so long ago at planning, we were refusing Lidl putting a site up at the side of the other side of the street. So, and the reasons given were that, you know, that it would distract drivers. From what I can see, this is a sign that changes the message, similar to the one, is it not? It's just a hoarding. It's not going to be the same as up at Autotech in Port Glasgow then? No.
Through you, convener, this is an existing hoarding.
Right.
That's already there. And what we're doing is, because it's common good, we have to consult on the respective lease of that existing hoarding.
Right.
Now, I can't guarantee at some stage in the future, if the lessee were granted permission for it, we would want to change it into an LED hoarding, but it's an existing hoarding.
It's
not
existing.
A new application.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chris?
Can you confirm that it's still there? Because I had a look. I'm sure it's no longer there, is it?
Yes.
Still there?
Yep.
I must admit, I generally don't think I think if it is there, I think it's something. I noticed that it's actually within what we're trying to do, deal with being the historic quarter of Greenock, and I think if the hoarding is actually there, I know it was there previously, but I thought it actually last I looked at it through various iterations of Google Earth, but I would think it's something that we probably want to avoid actually having within the historic quarter of Greenock if we're actually trying to think it as that. And certainly I would be keen that we actually maybe look at what you call it, no longer having the lease there, and look at other uses for that, or possibly looking at the things there, because I don't think it's appropriate if you're trying to regenerate them. Regenerating Greenock, we have a great big, what do you call it, 15-foot high by how many foot long, what do you call it, hoarding next to her inverted commas our historic quarter.
Can we listen for a consultation? I'm just wondering if this is against public consultation.
Yeah.
No, we're on the land, so let's make a decision. We're elected to make decisions.
Okay, so we're asked to consult on this. So have we agreed that we consult on the item?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Okay, item number 12 was the property assets management report, the public section of the report. This is Eddie.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Public report covers 4 items. First item deals with the renunciation of a lease for the from Shanty Road building in Gourock, and this follows the previous reports to committee on the progression of a long-term lease for the Curran Drive Community Hall building to the same group. Approval is sought for delegated authority to terminate the lease. The second item deals with anomalies from previous land transfers and corrective conveyancing to address land at Graham Street in Greenock and land adjacent to the Fancy Farm Tenants Hall in Greenock, as outlined in the report. Item 3 seeks permission to progress an open space consultation in respect of land in the Park Farm area of Port Glasgow and a possible disposal in connection with a proposed extension to existing shop premises, as outlined in the report. And the final item provides a brief update on the ongoing work in respect of the potential transfer of the Council's former tagged houses. As noted within the report, the previously reported timescales for this will not be achieved, and it's due to resourcing issues within River Clyde Homes. RCH remain committed to the process, however, and we are currently working with them to develop a revised programme for the remaining activities. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. I believe Ronnie wants to ask about Park Farm. Ronnie?
Ask about Park Farm, did you say?
Ronnie.
You need to draw me a map. Eddie, just a very quick one on 4.1, I think it is. Yeah, 4.1. You might recall that I did have some questions at one of, I think it was full committee last time, about leases. And obviously, as you're probably aware, that both Lynn and myself have been quite close to this one regarding the lease of Cairn Drive and the onward lease of the Scout Hall. But I just wondered, Eddie, at what point in the process would anyone who wants to get involved in a community asset transfer, such as the Scouts here, at what point in time would they have a handle, if you like, on the condition of the property that they wish to take on in terms of a survey? You know, how does that work? I mean, you know, okay, they come to us and they say, look, we would like to take this on as an asset transfer. Here's the reasons, blah, blah, blah. We go through committee, the officers talk it through and so on. So I guess my question is, at what point in time would they be aware of the condition of the building as far as we're concerned?
Yeah, through you, convener. I mean, the first thing for us to do is to get a handle on the condition of the property ourselves, because we don't have any information on that property because it's been with that group for a good number of years. So we would probably have to arrange a condition survey of that because we don't have any survey information on it just now. Audrey, I don't know if you can add to that in terms of the general process, but I mean, I know Audrey's contacted by groups regularly inquiring and looking for property, you know, and we're obviously from their last request to committee, but us and the group that deals with asset transfers will look to improve the process, and there'll be a further report coming back to committee on that. So I don't know, Audrey, can you add anything to that, or have I covered it adequately?
I think you've covered it adequately, Eddie. In terms of the Drumshanty building, anyone that's interested in that, the condition of the building should be pointed out to the group right at the start, and that would be taken into account when we're looking at any proposed discount factor for the rent or sale going forward.
No, I think I understand that, Audrey. I was more concerned about Cairn Drive. Was more concerned about the old community hall at Cairn Drive from the IL had that the Scouts are taking over. At what point in time would the bidders, if you like, or the people who want to take it on be aware of a condition survey?
Well, for the Cairn Drive hall, we recently commissioned a condition survey that's to be attached to the lease. We just got that ourselves, in fact, just last week. And it was handed over to the Scouts. The Scouts have agreed to take the building in its current state. The council doesn't have any money to carry out any repairs to it. But in terms of the lease, it will be an FRI lease, but they won't be expected to keep it in any better condition than it is currently in.
Okay, I think that's a key factor, Audrey, to be honest. You know, there might be an argument. I know you guys are working on a process and so on, but there might be an argument that says that when a community group comes to us to say, look, we're very interested in taking this on as an asset transfer, at that point in time, they should be made aware of the condition of the property. Don't you think that would be fair?
I think so, and as Eddie says, going forward, we're organising a group to look at all the community transfers and the costs associated with taking on any property will be part of the conversations we have with any group going forward.
Okay, that's helpful. Listen, appreciate that, Eddie and Audrey. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, can we agree on recommendations? Yeah. Okay, the rest of the items are to be held in private unless members of the press are still with us, so they can leave the meeting and members of the public.
Yeah.